Hello everyone, this is Tom from the CreatureWorks Studios, and today we're going to go to Project Puppet's website and purchase the Little Critter puppet pattern. That's their newest puppet pattern, and see what it's all about. Go through the instructions. I will then construct it and follow along with me, hopefully, and we'll come out with a really cool puppet at the end. So I'm on the Project Puppet website, and right off the top you see the Little Critter puppet pattern. Really cute, and it says check it out, so I'm gonna check it out. And it'll bring me to a page called the Little Critter pattern. The first thing I notice when I look at this is that the skill level is intermediate. I'm not sure what that's about, so it'll be interesting to see why it's in an intermediate. You'll be able to get it. So I'm gonna add it to cart, and on the side there's the cart. It asks for shipping, which you don't need. So scroll down, it tells you how much it is in US. Check out, and then I'm just gonna download this, and I'll fast forward it to now that I have the puppet pattern. So let me just go through this very quickly. Use the Little Critter puppet pattern to create a wide variety of small furry creatures, rabbits, squirrels, kittens, puppies, hamsters, mice, and even tiny monsters from your own imagination. The placement of the seams makes it easy to position and attach creature-specific arms, ears, and tails. Simply sew these features into the existing seams. So no special attachments are required. So that's pretty cool. Essentially, there's additional seams there. Well, I guess how it's constructed, so that you can put your attachments on. So if you want ears and stuff like that, and then you just integrate them into the seam. So you actually sew them into the seam. That's awesome. So I guess if you're doing that, you'll have to make your arms and ears and all that stuff prior to putting the body together, because that way you can integrate them in as you go. So there's a little bit of design work prior to building this, I think. Okay guys, so what I like to do is read all the information on the puppet pattern first on the first page, and then on the second page is a set of instructions, steps 1 to 5, pretty straightforward. And on the bottom of the third sheet there are pattern symbol keys. On each piece of pattern there is a special set of instructions, and it'll tell you with symbols and things on what to do with that pattern piece. Okay, so if you're doing this by hand, sewing by hand, you don't need to do this next step. But if you're using a sewing machine, you need to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance around each pattern piece. And this just allows the sewing machine to sew and give you the correct sizing at the end of it. So what you'll do is essentially just trace each individual pattern piece with a 1/2 inch seam allowance around the entire thing, except for the mouth section of your pattern piece. And when you do trace around and add seam allowance, you're going over the entire pattern piece, and you make sure that it is, I did this on purpose, but to make sure that it is uniform around the entire thing. And once you're done tracing, then you can cut those patterns out, and that'll be your patterns for seam allowance. So talking about cutting out, let's cut out all these pattern pieces. So here we go. So I like to keep the instructions just so I can go through them as I build, and I'll put them off to the side. Now with these patterns, what you can do is you can mount them, glue them onto construction paper or manila envelopes or file folders, or this is just a box of cereal or crackers or whatever, and you can glue them onto this and then cut them out, and you'll have them onto a sturdier board. But for this instructions, I'm just going to leave them as B, and just trace them using the paper. Now, save this, even if you cut out the parts on the last page, which is design and construction notes. Leave this little character, because what you can do is design your character before you build them. Now, I took this template and brought it into Procreate and designed my character that way. But you can also just, I'm using a pen, but you can use a pencil or a Sharpie. You can use a pencil if you want, and design your own character, what you want to see. Use this as a kind of a reference to what you want to build. Now I have this awesome fur that I found at Fabricland. The only thing is it's very straight, and I want it a little bit ragged. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to boil it down a little bit, make it a little bit shaggy, and then bring it back.
Nothing here to see, just a kill out me, trying to cut some teeth, trying to figure it out.
Alright, so this is the boiled version. But look at the texture difference between this and the original. So boiling it really adds a dimension to it, and just makes it look like it's actually used fur. That this character actually exists. It's been running around, and this seems like it's just got back from the salon, or is a little bit less snappy. So if you notice too, this reads a little bit more busy. I love this this look of fur. Now it's time to trace the pattern onto the back of this fabric.
I let it go, 'cause I won't see you later on, we're not allowed to talk it out. I said I'd go, put myself on the show, but I'm still trying to figure it out. I broke my shoe, take a bet on you, but you didn't know I planned it out. I said I'd go, yeah, I won't see you later on, we're not allowed to figure it out. Trying to figure it out. Nothing better to do when I'm stuck on you. I'm still here trying to figure it out.
Alright, now it's time to trace the body front. Now, just to keep note that if you're doing it on fur, the nap needs to go down in that direction. If you're doing a character like a rabbit, and let's say, and you want the front of the body to have white fur, and the rest of the body is brown, you'll trace this portion on the white fur. Now I'm tracing it right now on the same color fur because I want my entire character to be yellow. So now when I trace, just make sure you indicate where the center lines are, where that edge is, where you have to mirror, because when you flip it, you can just line up that mirror edge and make sure that you get that true mirrored edge, and just trace the rest on the other side. Now I can see why this is an intermediate pattern. This is the arm and paw piece pattern for your character, and what this allows you to do is come up with your own pattern for this character. So I'm going to do kind of a mitten hand, but you can do a claw, you can have 5 fingers, 10 fingers, whatever you want. And to achieve that, all you have to do is trace this pattern the way that you want that piece to look. So again, my hand is going to be a mitten hand, and so I'm just going to trace it with that mitten shape that I want. And when you do this, when you trace it, this piece will be the new piece that you're going to use. So all of the indicator marks and things like that you need to transfer onto this piece. And it's good, just good practice to do that with any pattern that piece that you make. Just in case you need to reference back on this piece, you can just know what you used it for and what was when it was constructed, how many you need, and that sort of thing. So yeah, you're going to retrace, and now I'm going to use this pattern piece and ditch that pattern piece. So again, I need 4 of these, so let's trace these out. Now, I gotta remember to flip. So there. Now you can go back to use your eraser and cut it all out.
They tell them to me and pull photos up, and they're all connected like a pair of handcuffs. No one seemed affected, that everyone is fucked. But there was a softness, some kind of understanding. Those 2 a.m. decisions, always shaky landings, and no one ever knew what could be demanded. Maybe it's the cards that she was handed. You call me up from a payphone. I said hang tight, I can drive you home. I put on up and with a southern accent, I offered you my dad's leather jacket. Yeah.
So now I have everything cut out. Now time to sew.
She always looked tired, she dazzled as a drunk. She even pulled off the stupid haircut. She said, I don't need.
Now on to the next step. What we're going to do is put all these pattern pieces together, starting with the darts on the face pattern. And I like to use clips, but if you don't have clips, you can simply use pins and pin them. And I'll show you how to use a pin if you don't know how. Pretty straightforward. You stick them in the top, through, down into the bottom, and that'll keep everything snug and not shift around. Now, this is a cool tool that I came across when I was watching a documentary on teddy bear making. One of the factory workers that was sewing on a sewing machine had a wooden clay tool, and basically he would use it to push the fur fibers down back into the pattern piece, back into the piece, and it basically would clear. Now you can also do this by using scissors and snipping about a half or quarter inch, 1/8 of an inch maybe from the seam, and then closing it up from there. But I love this tool. It's very, very easy, very crude, and it does the job. Look at that. It makes a clean seam for this to be pinched and now sewn together. So once I do that, I'm going to spin it around, and this is a face piece. I'm going to do the other dart on the other side, so it's seam 4. Now I have Velcro on this because I attach it to my sewing machine, so when I sew I can use it for that as well. So pretty cool. Now, putting these pieces together, like I said, this is the face seam, face pattern piece, and there is a seam 2 and a mouth seam, and it's going to connect with your head and body seam on the mouth. And so you don't want to make the mistake like I did and put the wrong side in. You want to make sure that the mouth is lined up with the mouthpiece. So the mouthpiece of the face pattern is starts with the edge of the head and body mouth piece on the top. And you're simply going to put the seams together. I'm going to ditch that wooden piece, that wooden tool right now, just so that I can put these pieces together and show you. And you're simply going to follow the curve of that so that the seam 4 meets. So the seam back of the head and body of seam 4 matches the dart of seam 4 on the face piece. And then you're going to do that with the other piece, the other side. So you're going to, I just need to put this fur back a bit, and then Again, you're adding seam 4 to that dart of seam 4 and clipping that. And then you're going to wrap this around so that the mouth edge meets the other mouth edge. So mouth edge of the face pattern will go on the top edge of the mouth of the head and body pattern. So I like to kind of skip the middle when I'm pinching these, and then it gives you a cleaner line. So same with this, you're going to use a clip and clip the top portion of the seam first, and then go all the way down to the bottom where the two edges meet. I'm just going to clean it up a bit, clip that, and then once those are clipped, straighten it out a bit, and so you get that clean line, and it's not all wrinkly and stuff. That you're getting a true line there. So now once that's done, you have to realize that if you've done arms or a tail, before putting on the front body part, you're going to have to build your arms first, because that's going to be integrated in with the seams. Same with the tail. That's going to go here or wherever you want it, and the ears as well for the top face piece. So just to realize that, if you are building ears, that's going to go in from the back side and out, and then you'll stitch it that way. And oh yeah, I forgot the jaw. So making sure that you also line up seam 3 on both the head and body pieces. And once that's done, we're ready to rock and roll. We're going to now put the arms together, I think. So let's get started on that. So now that I have my arms cut out, you'll want to, some people would want to, if they're doing it on fur, to just trace them and sew it on a sewing machine. But the thing about sewing arms and things like that on a sewing machine with fur is that it'll get trapped. The fur will get trapped in those seams. It'll be like this, and it'll be all trapped on the inside, and you don't want that. You want it to be clean. So hand stitching is the way to go for these. So you're going to line these together so that the fur side is in, and then put these together as best as you can, making sure that you have a clean seam line. So you're going to pin them, and then use the fur tool if you get into a rough spot where you can't push the fur all the way down. Like in this thumb, for instance, I'm going to use my fur tool and do that. So and then once you have that clean line, you can continue pinning everything, and you're going to pin the entire arm. Now I usually leave about 1.5 to 2 inches on the bottom of that arm at the shoulder, where the shoulder is, and that's so that you can turn it inside out very easily. So now that it's done, just to note too, if you have a tail or ears or anything, again, a reminder, you need to sew those all up as well as the arms, so that you can integrate them in the seam as you go. So now that that's said, let's learn the whip stitch so we can sew these together. Here we go. What I like to do when I'm stitching is essentially bring it in through the 2, push with my finger, grab. I usually hook with my finger here, and I go all the way, pull it all the way up, and then I pinch with my fingers to hold that stitch while it's going, so it goes directly where I want it to, and then just keep going. So then I go through, hook, and pinch. If I just pull, then it's gonna grab stuff, it's gonna bind, then I'm gonna have to go back in, push it out, get all this fur out of here, go through. Now watch, see how it's grasping? Sometimes it'll loop onto that, and so you'll have your stitch will be from here to here as opposed from here to where it's supposed to go, which is straight up. So if you use your fingers guide it to the spot that it's supposed to be. And then every couple stitches, which I haven't done yet because I'm kind of showing you guys, is you want to put a lock stitch in. So you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna clip it with your finger, pull, and then once it gets to a certain length, just go back through the hoop and then pull, and it will lock that stitch in place. Okay, so I'm going to show you what happens when you get to the end of your line. Now what I like to do is leave about 2, maybe 3 inches on the line. But if you're sewing and you get to near the end, you're like dum, 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 dum. Now when it gets this short, I can't hook my finger, so I just basically guide it with my fingers all the time, and then it's getting too short now for me to work with, but I'll guide it. Now the last 2 stitches I do 2 lock stitches, so I go back through the hoop. That's 1. Two. Now this is the way I was taught. I go back through the stitch that I've done, give that another lock stitch. There we go. So then I cut the thread, split these apart like so, tie a few knots. I tie 3, and they're just regular knots. If you don't know how to tie knots, tie lots. Shout out to a friend, Beth, that taught me that. And then what you want to do is, with that line that you have left, you want to cut it just a little bit, because I call it a flag. It just lets you know that there is, that might be a little too much. That's just to let you know that there is a knot there. Because what I'll do then is I'll either go back with a hot glue gun, or I'll go back with Fabri-Tac and just put a little bit of glue on those seams, or sorry, on the seam, on the knot, so it doesn't become untied. So I'm gonna continue sewing this arm. I'm almost done.
My house in Budapest, my hidden treasure chest, golden grand piano, my beauty focus EOU. Ooh, you, ooh, I'd leave it all. My acres of land I've achieved. It may be hard for you to stop and believe, but for you, ooh, I'd leave it all. Oh, for you, I'd leave it all. Give me one good reason why I should never make a change. Baby, if you owe me, then all of this will go away. My many artifacts, the list goes on. If you just say the words, I'll up and run. Oh, to you, I'd leave it all. Oh, to you, I'd leave it all. Give me one good reason why I should never make a change. Baby, if you owe me, then all of this will go away. Give me one good reason why I should never make a change. Baby, if you owe me, then all of this will go away. My friends and family, they don't understand. They fear they'll lose so much if you take my hand. But for you, I'd lose it all.
So as you've seen, I sewed the jaw, and that is seam 3, and the body I just have pinned because I'm going to add in the arm. And how you add the arm in is I leave the one side open so I can push the arm through. There should be no polyfill inside the arm shoulder. Make sure the thumbs are up whenever you put these in so that they're in the right position when you turn them inside out. And then simply position it where you want and sew just the arm into that seam. So I use a curve needle here because I love curved needles. And once just that arm is sewn in, you're not doing the entire side, just the arm. You're going to do the same on the other side. So you're going to right now I'm going to clip the shoulder because the other shoulder is clipped, and hopefully that gives me enough space. So you want the spacing to be the same on the other side. So I'm going to grab this arm again, thumb up, and I'm going to go in through the other side. I'll unclip it and pass it through under the other arm and do the same thing. I'm going to sandwich it in between the seam, making sure that it's roughly the same amount sticking out as the other arm was. And then I'm going to sew that closed. And it's just going to be sewing that area between the two clips here. Now you'll be using the exact same method for adding ears and the tail as well to the other areas of the puppet. So I just wanted to do the arms just to show you how it's done, and you can use the same method for the other appendages and things like that. So now once you've had that done, remember the arms are the only thing that is sewn right now. You're going to turn the puppet inside out and just make sure that the arms are equal, that there's equal spacing, and that they're perpendicular to each other. Yes, it is. Yay! All right, and then you're going to turn it inside out again, and then starting from the jaw line, which is seam 3, you're going to start sewing it all the way down to the end of the body, and then you're going to do the same on the opposite side on the body front pattern as well, just to get the full body front done. Alright, time to find fabric for the inside of the mouth, and I like this black, so that's what we're going to go with. Bonk. Now I cut a smaller piece so it's easier to work with, and with chalk, I just use plain old chalk, no tailor's chalk. I just trace the fabric mouth and make sure I make all the markings on it and transfer that over to the actual pattern and then cut it out. Now it's going to be a little tricky on how these meet up. Now the top marking on the fabric mouth, the very top, will meet up with seam 1 on the face. The next seam over, seam 2, the next marking over will line up with seam 2, and the center of the mouth fabric will line up with the center marking of the mouth, and then the bottom marking will line up with seam 3 of the jaw, and then it goes in reverse order again. You just basically follow the markings and they should line up perfectly. Make sure that they do line up, because if they don't, you're going to end up with a lopsided mouth or a not so good looking mouth. So it's really important that you get these to line up perfectly and that they're centered and and that there's no overlapping or anything. Now I've chose just craft foam for the mouth plates. Some people like bin plastic and things like that. I just put glue on both the craft foam and the fabric, and make sure that when you're lining these up, I've put the glue on already and let it dry a little bit. When you're lining these up, that it's perfectly where they're supposed to be. They're lined up dead center where the markings are. Now for this, you could do this in one piece, but I like a little gap between, so I've put some glue on both mouth plates and then used a piece of fabric and tacked it onto the first piece. Then I close the mouth and just basically squeeze that fabric on. It just makes it a little bit cleaner and more comfortable on the inside, so I don't have that edge rubbing against my hand. And there we go. It's all finished. Now, I just discovered that the Build-A-Bear shirt also fits these without any alterations. So you can use a Build-A-Bear shirt. I have this one. I cut off the tag. If you really want it out, you can rip open the seam and take it out and then sew it back, but whatever. So yeah, so I used this Muppet shirt for this character, and you can spot sew the shirt on so it doesn't slip off. And just cleaning up a little bit. And you know what? I think I'm going to put a rod. Yeah, let's do rods next for this character. Alright, so I use 3 32-inch copper-coated steel rods and put it through my rod block, which gives me a perfect flag. It makes the same flag twice, which I love. And I'm going to take these rods and put them into dowels, which I drill holes out of. Now, in order to put the rod inside, like so, and work, I'm going to have to cut open the wrists. So make sure you're cutting don't cut the fur, cut the fabric lining, and don't cut the seam that you stitched for those. Cut beside, and then you're going to pull out some of the polyfill out of the wrist so that you can fit the flag in. I use needle nose pliers for this. It's very easy. And then test fit the flag inside just to see if it works. Let's see. Hello everyone. Hello. Now I'm going to get the rods and mark them so that I can get electrical shrink and put black electrical shrink on them. Put them on. So I'm just adjusting, and once both are done, I put the shrink on and then put them into the dowels and 5-minute epoxy the dowels, and then use some more shrink. I think it's 20 millimeter shrink for the bottom rods. Heat gun them, and then they're good to go. Here's 2 rods. Now this is a down and dirty way of doing these rods, but I basically will sandwich the rods in between 2 pieces of foam. Again, not the best thing to do, but I've seen other tutorials and took BJ Geyer's class, know how to do rods, but this is another way of doing it that I wanted to cover, that I used to do when I puppet wrangled and stuff like that really fast. It fell out. So now once you get them together, you put them in, basically blast some hot glue in. You got to watch because it's really hot, and hold it for a while, and then once that's kind of dried up, then you can sew it using a whip stitch, and again with my curved needle. And there you go. Ta-da! Done. Rods are done, and I'm just going to put them in a 90s gangster pose for you.
Monster crawling all over me. My head was aching. My hands are shaking. Monster crawling all.
Alright, we're down to the last stretch, and I'm basically sewing the nose up, and then picking out the seam with a dog brush. I don't press too hard because it'll rip the seam, just gentle. And my daughter found the nose and she wanted to puppeteer, and so she's acting like this is a little mouse. So now that I have the nose, I basically trimmed away so that I have the backing showing from the fur, and I'm gonna hot glue gun that on and then quickly sew it on. I also decided to put a tongue in, so I just carved that out of foam. Looks pretty sharp. And now for the glasses. So with the glasses, I just sewed the arms of the glasses onto his head, and then used glue to essentially glue the glasses onto the thread, and just to make sure that the thread didn't come undone. Alright, that concludes our tutorial on the little critter puppet pattern. I thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you were entertained. You've learned something as well. I really enjoyed this pattern. It does take a little bit of time. It took me roughly about 2 hours from beginning to end. And thank you very much for watching, and make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and like this video. Thank you very much, and see you later.
The Creature Works Studio.